provide the wiretap warning before we get started. We are going to be recording this presentation, and we post it on our YouTube channel for people to watch if they can't be here today. So if you object to being on the recording, then you may want to sign out now. So you're stuck with me and Tanya today. You usually have your MC as Desiree Myers, but Desiree was unable to be here today. So I am Natalie Novotny-Goals. If you probably have seen my name on things, but you may not have met me in person. But I'm the supervisor at PCCD, and one of the main program areas that I handle is STOP, along with my staff. And there's Tanya Bauer. And of course, Mike Pocha is not here either, but guess he'll be here next time. So without further ado, I'd just like to introduce some folks that are going to be providing the presentation today. Keith Hinkel, who is with the Office of Elder Justice in the Courts, which is located in AOPC. We also have Amy Whitworth, who is the Director of the Office of Elder Justice in the Courts. And we have David Shallcross, who is a special agent with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, who does a lot of work around crimes against the elderly. So I will let our presenters get started, and they can indicate to you what the level of formality is, if people can just ask questions as they cover things or put them in the chat, and we'll attempt to address them as we go along. If anything requires a complicated answer, we'll just take it down and we'll send it out to everybody later. So I will hand it over to Keith. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Tanya, for organizing this. We're happy to join and present today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, so hopefully this will work. All right. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Take that as yes.
That's good.
So we're going to do a brief introduction to really kick this off. As noted, my name is Keith Hinkel. I'm the Office of Elder Justice in the Courts Analyst Supervisor. We are part of the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, and we wanted to give a brief overview about what's the work of our office, how do we interact with the courts, how do we interact with the public, how could we potentially be beneficial to others in the county, other organizations in the counties, and really see where else we can go as an office to help the state and help older adults across the state. And in the second half, and the majority of the presentation will be by David Shallcross to really identify elder abuse, some tips on how to do that, and really how to address any of those concerns you may be having in your local communities. So we already had our little introduction here, so let's jump into the content. Before we can really get into what our office does and what we do and why we're here and how it's established, first we need to look at the Advisory Council on Elder Justice in the Courts, who David is also a member of as well. This Advisory Council was established in January of 2015 out of a recommendation from the Elder Law Task Force. The Elder Law Task Force was prior to 2015. Real brief overview of that. That was a group of experts that included lawyers, elder law attorneys, judges, advocates, congressional staff, a whole slew of experts in this field that looked at Pennsylvania and wanted to see where can we improve as it relates to elder law, to elders' rights, to guardianship, and they actually recommended 130 areas that Pennsylvania could improve. One of them was to establish an advisory council, and also one was to create an office of the elder justice. That's how we got here. The advisory council really focuses on three main areas, and that's guardianship reform, monitoring of guardians, elder abuse and exploitation, as well as access to justice. It's currently chaired by Judge Lois Murphy. She's a judge out of Montgomery County. The vice chair is Judge Sheila Woodskipper. She's a judge out of Philadelphia. And our Supreme Court liaison is Chief Justice Deborah Todd. When this was all started, she obviously was not the Chief Justice. We were very happy to see her stay in this role and give us that connection with the Supreme Court for anything that we need and the advice and the guidance that she's able to provide. What's so unique about this advisory council and where it is so beneficial to our office and a lot of the work that is being done in Pennsylvania is this is one of the unique areas where you see judges, elected leaders like senators and representatives from both parties, advocates, the Secretary of Aging and his staff, attorneys, and various experts in fields that affect older adults and older Pennsylvanians across the state come together quarterly, sit around a table and talk about ideas, how we can improve, what work can be done, how can we partner and collaborate with other organizations, both locally at the state level as well as federally, to really make a change across the state to benefit older Pennsylvanians. This is just a little picture of everybody that's on the council right now. You can see it's a large council, plus we have advisors that help out, and we stay in contact with previous members and other members of the judicial branch, as well as with legislation to really make sure we have progress in all of the areas I discussed earlier. Some highlights of the advisory council, these were initiatives that were spearheaded through this council, as well as coming out of recommendations for the Elder Law Task Force. The number one biggest accomplishment that we've made is the guardianship tracking system. Some of you may be aware of that. This is really a countrywide leader in guardianship monitoring and the ability for guardians to file their statutorily required annual reports. This is one of the first of the kind systems across the country that allows Pennsylvania to collect data on all guardianship cases. We can look at improvements based on data. So we're not just guessing if something needs to change in the state. We have hard data. We have proof of where we're seeing struggles, of where we're seeing areas that we can improve. And we have seen a ton of improvement across guardianship in Pennsylvania since this system went live in late 2018. Another major accomplishment of the Advisory Council was the creation of the elder abuse and also a second guardianship bench book that went out to all Pennsylvania judges, giving guidance for the first time to judges on how to handle guardianship cases, including unique scenarios, and also how to recognize and address elder abuse cases, as well as if they have suspicion of elder abuse in the courtroom by a party on the case. In addition to what I mentioned earlier with those accomplishments, we also saw major advocacy and legislative action in 2023, at the end of 2023, with the passage of Act 61. Many members of our advisory council were heavily involved with that, from either sponsoring the bill, supporting the bill, doing advocacy work, and really helping to get that across the finish line. For those unfamiliar with that, that's going to guarantee representation by counsel for every single person facing guardianship. If somebody has guardianship and is coming back to potentially get their rights back, they're going to have an attorney representing their best interests and making sure that their voice is heard. It's also requiring certification for professional guardians, as well as other items that really are going to help improve guardianship in Pennsylvania across the board. We also provide education for judges, attorneys, court staff, and the public, and we support and review any potential orphans court rule changes. And this happened prior to 2019. There was a major change to some of the orphans court rules to really integrate state consistency. Prior to that being done, there was a lot of variance county by county. Those new rules really help streamline that process across the state. That leads us into what our office does, which again, we're the Office of Elder Justice in the Courts. And don't feel bad if you haven't heard of us before this presentation. We did a presentation a couple months ago with newly elected judges at the Magisterial District Justice Office. There's about 80 of them. We asked how many people really heard of our office. We had 5 people. So that's not uncommon because we do a lot of support work behind the scenes to help the courts. We do education with partners like Dave Shallcross. So there's a lot of areas that we work on behind the scenes. And we really want to make people aware that there's stuff that we can do to help all these different agencies, to help guardians and other people interested in the work to help older Pennsylvanians. The Office of Elder Justice, or OEJC, is committed to assuring that Pennsylvania courts are accessible and educated in best practices to address issues of elder abuse and exploitation, as well as guardianship reform and monitoring guardians. As you can see, there's a lot of crossover here between our office and the Advisory Council. We provide education pretty much to anyone that needs it. If someone requests a presentation and it falls into the realm of guardianship or something related to older Pennsylvanians, if we can't do the training ourselves, we will partner with the right people to get that education in that audience's hands. We are very big on collaboration with our office, and that's why we always jump at these opportunities like with PCCD to get our name out there, to get our work out there. So if there's any way that we can collaborate in the future to help enhance the access to justice for older Pennsylvanians, to help with guardianship, to identify elder abuse, or anything else that really falls in this network of really helping older Pennsylvanians. One of our biggest changes or impacts that we've seen over the past couple of years, our office, through the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, actually received an Administration for Community Living grant. This grant actually is going to total close to $3 million, and it's a 3-year grant. It started in September 1st of 2022. This was designed to promote reform in guardianship and access to justice in the courts. That was really what was driving ACL to offer these funds. Pennsylvania was one of only 3 states to receive this grant award, so we were very proud of multiple applications, and we were one of 3 that were selected. The 3 overarching goals of our grant is to assure due process for the alleged incapacitated person, improve guardian monitoring capabilities and prevent abuse and exploitation, and ultimately promote alternatives to guardianship. Not saying guardianship is a bad thing, but it always should be used as a last resort if there's other alternatives available. Some of the highlights of the projects that we are funding through this grant: we held the very first Pennsylvania Guardianship Justice Summit in September 2023. This was the first time 175 experts in the field of elder justice, of guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, and all the other entities that deal with older Pennsylvanians came together. Again, these were all experts to talk about how we can make significant change in Pennsylvania, how we can look at reforming areas of guardianship, access to justice, and others. This was a very, very big success. We're holding a second summit. These were all by invite only. So if you are interested in potentially looking at this type of summit and getting information from it, you can feel free to reach out to our office. And I do not believe we put that on a slide, but you can reach us at OEJC@pacourts.us. And I'm sure our friends here at PCCD can send out our information to reach out to us at any time. We also established regional collaboration groups at this summit that are continuing to meet. There's 4 regions that we broke up in Pennsylvania that are looking at a community level how we can make an impact for older Pennsylvanians. We also had a pilot project that's still ongoing to offer, through a legal services organization, representation at all guardianship proceedings for an alleged incapacitated person or a person already with a guardian. We're enhancing GTS to make our data even stronger and easier to really identify areas that we can improve. We created recently, this was released within the past few months, a Pennsylvania Guardian Handbook, which is available on our website. You can look at a digital copy. You can also request a free copy. This is the first of its kind statewide Guardian Handbook that really goes over the responsibilities and role that a guardian should expect once they are appointed. There's also guardianship monitoring as part of the grant. How can we, as the OEJC, help the courts better monitor their cases to make sure if someone has a guardian, that guardian is doing their role properly and the person is being taken care of. So we're working with the courts any way we can to help with that. Education, as you can see here, all this entire slide is about education. That's a big priority for our office, including creating educational video series, which our first batch of videos will be released later this summer. And they're going to be targeting guardians, again, going over in video form what it means to be a guardian and what's expected in their role. So on that note, I'm going to pass it off to David Shallcross. I do ask, if you have any questions, just wait to the very end. Please put them in the chat, or we can have an open Q&A at the end. Anything from our office, and I'm sure David would be happy to address any as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this off to David.
All right. Thank you, Keith, and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this program. I am with the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General under the leadership of Michelle Henry, our Attorney General. And it's so important that we look out for our vulnerable population and our older adults, of course, and care-dependent persons. This program is going to talk a little bit about elder abuse identification, identifying neglect, endangerment, and other forms of abuse, including financial exploitation. Next. So let's talk about caretakers. First, we have to decide, do we understand the role of the caretaker? Who is a caretaker? Well, it could be just about anyone. Someone who's assuming those responsibilities, whether paid or non-paid. It could be a professional person. It could be somebody working in the professional fields, nursing homes, personal care homes, assisted living. It could be somebody that's a family member, a neighbor, a friend from place of worship, someone that shows up and just is helping that person get through their day, providing them their food, meds, bathing, medication, dressing, whatever it takes. So caretakers are pretty widespread, and again, can be just about anyone, paid or unpaid. Next. Neglect. Failure to care for someone properly. Now, criminal neglect is taking it to the next level. Some neglect isn't purposely done. It's done by accident, unknowing, unwitting, not educated enough to be in the role. But criminal neglect of a care dependent person occurs when that caregiver knowingly, intentionally, or recklessly causes injury. And yes, that includes up to death to a care dependent person by failing to provide either treatment, care, goods, services that are necessary to maintain health or safety of that individual person. Next. Then we have endangerment. Action of putting someone or something at risk or in danger. And again, criminal neglect has to be a care dependent person, and it has to occur when the caregiver intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, and those are the key words, endangers the welfare of that care dependent person, again, through the failure of providing treatment, care, goods, or services, and ultimately not injured as a result. So they were endangered, but not actually injured. And that is something to think about. So abuse, of course, is a care dependent person that occurs when that caregiver, again, intentionally subjects or threatens, it can be a threat, to subject a care dependent person to unwanted physical contact or other harassing activity with the intent to harass, alarm, or annoy. This includes things like videotaping that person without their knowledge or permission, making lewd and harassful comments, laughing and embarrassing them in a public setting. It can be threats. It can be waking at an inconvenient hour for no general purpose or no medical purpose. All these things can now fall under abuse. Of course, physical harm also is a form of abuse, as well as sexual assault, financial exploitation, and the other matters of failure to care properly for that person. Next. What are the indicators? Well, let's take a look at some of the points that are on the slide are really going to direct you to see just how we can identify some of these issues. And one is someone who's dehydrated or malnourished. If they're not being fed and watered, that they have what they need to get through the day and survive in a healthy manner, that's a problem. Untreated bed sores, or what we call pressure wounds, ulcers, those are a sure sign that someone is not providing the proper care. They're not being moved, adjusted, and clean sheets being provided, that kind of thing. Unexplained wounds, bruises, or injuries. Often we see older people can bruise pretty easily, but there are bruise patterns that can be read by experts and investigators to determine whether it may be an accidental natural bruise or was it caused intentionally by someone. Did someone fall out of bed on their own, or were they dropped because they were mishandled by the caregiver? If someone is withdrawn, they have a lack of emotion, looking down at the ground, won't make eye contact. These are clues sometimes, not always an indicator, but it's a clue. Poor grooming, soiled bedding, clothing. They haven't had a change of clothing in a week. That's outrageous, but we do see these kind of things. Where's the caregiver? Absentee caregiver. Someone's scheduled to be there, but they're not appearing. And if they're not there, that means no one's taking care of that individual. Those services aren't being rendered, but maybe they're being billed. And that could simply be a case of fraud. Could be a financial exploitation, as well as physical harm and abuse and endangerment, neglect of care. Financial concerns, when we start seeing bills backing up, but the person had the monetary means initially, and now someone is involved in assisting them with getting these bills paid, and they're not happening. But the money is also missing. So where did the money go? We have to follow that money trail to see if someone is being exploited financially. The general appearance of the consumer and the residents. Now, that doesn't mean it's just needs to be tidied up is not a problem. Having some things around that aren't put away is okay. But when we're talking about spoiled food, no plumbing, no electricity, we're talking about a hoarding situation that it's a fall risk for that person to move from one room to the restroom. These are conditions that we want to be investigated. Personal isolation, and that often falls with other forms of abuse. A person that's being isolated, it may be because they don't want their condition to be known. They don't want anyone investigating. They don't want to realize that their finances are being taken from them. So they keep them pretty quiet, keep them locked down in a particular room of the house, perhaps, or just not leaving the home. Visitors may come and be turned away, that kind of thing. Frequently missed medical or dental appointments or any type of important appointment. Often the perpetrator doesn't want to be discovered, and a medical or dental appointment that may lead to the clues of other signs of neglect, endangerment, or abuse. And the person that's the caregiver is going to be questioned, obviously. So often they'll make excuses not to make these appointments, or they'll try to change doctors on the fly if one doctor starts asking questions. And again, these are clues that we look at as indicators of these forms of abuse. Next slide, please, Keith. So a little bit about financial exploitation. Of course, it's the conduct by a caretaker or any other person, doesn't have to be a caretaker, against an older adult or that older adult's resources without informed consent of the older adult, or without consent obtained through misrepresentation, coercion, threats of force that result in a monetary, personal, or other benefit or gain for profit for the perpetrator of the monetary or personal loss to the older adult. If you are in a fiduciary capacity and you're doing things for that older adult, you are not to benefit personally from that older adult's resources. That is basically what we're talking about. What are the indicators of these issues? Again, sudden changes in that banking practice. The older adult was going to the bank on their own quite often, regular, maybe every 2 weeks, to do their banking, make their deposits, pick up what they needed. And all of a sudden, we don't see that person in the bank alone. They come in with an escort, some family member, caretaker, neighbor, an unknown person even. And that person seems to do all the talking. The older adult's very silent and stands in the background, looks withdrawn. That could be a sign of exploitation. Unauthorized withdrawals, including the ATM, debit cards. A lot of this starts on a simple task. Hey, would you please go to the grocery store? I'd like to have these list of these groceries picked up. And the caretaker or family member or neighbor says, yeah, absolutely. I'll be glad to do that. How am I going to pay for this? I need your debit card and your PIN number. There we go. Starts out with the change doesn't come home, right? There should have been change from that purchase. There's no change. Then it's the debit card is used and the PIN number is provided. And right on the terminal, would you like cash back? That person thinks, well, I do need gas. I did the errand. They say yes to a small amount. Then it increases and increases. Next thing you know, they're at the ATM, they're at a casino, they're out on the town spending that older adult's funds from the ATM card. Abrupt changes in financial documents, wills, medical directives, things of that nature. Unexpected sale or transfer of home, cars, valuables, antiques, coin collections. That delinquent bill notification is a big signal. That's a red flag of fraud. That person was very on top of their expenses and their bills for their entire life, and all of a sudden we see a change in that. That's something to be questioned. Disappearance of funds or valuables, sometimes known as gifts. Well, mom wanted me to have that. It was a gift. Well, let's check with mom. Is that a gift? Was that documented as a gift? Is it a loan? Oh, yeah, mom loaned me the money. Well, where's the documentation? Well, there's none. It's my mother. Well, that doesn't really cut it. We want to see things are properly documented. It's in the best interest of both the older adult and the fiduciary person, that person in that responsibility. Substandard care, and this is a way that we see a lot of these things unfold, sadly. When that person is not receiving the proper care and the money's disappearing at the same time, sad to say that we've heard a lot of suspects tell us that, well, I didn't expect grandma to live that long, that kind of thing. And that's alarming, but unfortunately it does happen. And again, maybe assigning someone power of attorney and there's an abrupt change or the power of attorney is being misused. You know, that power of attorney is a civil document that allows someone else to act in your behalf financially, but it's in your best interest that they act. That's the rule. The rule of law is it must be in the best interest of the principal, the older adult. Again, they cannot benefit personally from these transactions, and they must act as if that older adult was making that decision for themselves. What would that person do? That you need to be in that mindset to be that fiduciary on that agent of power of attorney document. And if you misuse that power of attorney, that is a financial crime and you'll be prosecuted. Next slide, please. Here's more red flags for this financial exploitation. Overflowing amounts of junk mail. When you go into a consumer's home and or their room at their care facility, and you see a lot of junk mail, take a look at it because you don't have to open everything. Just kind of skim over the envelopes even. You see a lot of sweepstakes, lottery prize notifications, purchasing of magazine subscriptions, offers to change your electric provider, charitable organization requests. And I mean not one or two, I mean we're talking a stack. That could be an indicator that their information has been sold and that it's out there and being misused. New friend, long lost relatives on the scene and taking control. That is a red flag. You know, maybe that person was not invited to come and take that role. They just showed up. I'd want to know more about that person and why they're here and what their intent is. Consistent and constant incoming phone calls from unknown callers, scam calls, people fishing for information, identity theft occurs. People might realize the person may be experiencing a cognitive decline and they're able to manipulate them for more financial information. Last minute emergency trips to the bank or the ATM, and it becomes frequent. You know, anyone can have a emergency, but when you're having an emergency 2-3 times a week, something's going wrong here. Purchase of large amounts of gifts and gift cards, prepaid debit cards, wire transfers. Wire transfer, of course, could be done through a financial institution, your bank, your credit union. It can also be done at a grocery store, department store, Western Union, MoneyGram. The pharmacies have these counters where you can transfer funds. Be very cautious about who you're sending it to and why. And if they are hesitant to explain to you why they're moving this money around, there may be fraud involved, and they've been warned not to share the information. And again, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, sudden purchases of any of these digital assets, Zoom, transactions where you're sending money electronically with Zelle, Venmo, Cash App. These are things to be looked at carefully and wonder why all of a sudden is this older adult involved in digital assets. If they weren't really tech savvy, someone is directing those actions, and that's something to be looked at as well. Next, please. Who are the perpetrators? Well, potentially it could be anyone. Often we sadly see family members are in that role. Neighbors, friends, caregivers. Tip of the day, never provide financial accounts to your caregiver. If someone is providing medical and health care and assistance in your daily living, they should not be also involved in your financial decisions. Keep those things separate. Have a professional person provide you with care or a family member provide you with care, but have someone different assigned as your power of attorney or a financial fiduciary role, not the same people. Please separate that. And even those professionals that we're looking at for this role, financial planners, attorneys, funeral director, pre-planned funerals, I think are great. Prepaid, not always. Insurance agents, they could be trying to sell you annuities. That's an investment opportunity, an annuity, but it's also an insurance-based product, and they must be licensed by the insurance commission. And just about anyone, a total stranger could take advantage of someone and be a potential perpetrator of financial exploitation and fraud. Next. So Pennsylvania, again, Keith really did a great summary of some of the wonderful things that the council is doing, that the Office of Elder Justice in the Courts is doing, the AOPC is involved in, and all the state agencies that work with our older adults are engaged in a lot of these new improvements. And I got to say also thank you to Amy, who's with us today. She's done tremendous work on building that guardianship tracking system. I know she didn't really get a chance to address everybody, but I want to point that out. Tremendous work. It's one of the best and a model across the country for that tracking. And with that, we see examples of when things go wrong, because that will flag unusual account spending that's changed over last year's report. It automatically indicates there's something to be looked at. That is incredible. That is doing the job that we can't always have eyes on every person's account across the state that's under guardianship. Now the tracking system does that with us, and it will alert the courts. So Pennsylvania enacted a law just recently, about 2 years ago, and that law is specific, called financial exploitation of an older adult or care-dependent person. And that's found in our crimes code, which is Title 18 of the Pennsylvania statutes, and it's subsection 3922, which is our theft section. And this particular statute is 3922.1, and it is defined as a person in a position of trust. That's a fiduciary position, a caregiver, a power of attorney agent, a guardian, right? This is someone who's trusted financially to work with that older adult or care dependent individual. And they commit the offense of financial exploitation. They are taking property, resources, or finances of the older or care dependent person and finding that they are achieving personal gain. That is a crime under 3922.1, and they will be subject to the criminal penalties. Please read the entire statute. We have a limited time on today's presentation, and I didn't want to fill it up with slides explaining the entire process of the statute and what the elements of the crime are, but I encourage you to look it up, 3922.1 of Title 18. Keith? Thank you. So our agency, the Office of Attorney General, has a lot of resources, and we're going to discuss in the next slides about how our resources are structured and how you can reach us. So I'm the director of our Senior Protection Unit. I am not a lawyer nor an agent for the office. I am actually a civil employee. My background was in law enforcement. I've been in public safety for 40 some years, and our Senior Protection Unit is there to take calls of concern, complaints, resource providing. We have educational aspects. We can go out and do presentations like the one you're experiencing right now today. All of our materials are on our website. We also take in complaints of concern where we see there may be a criminal element to a complaint. If it's something that looks like it's physical abuse and the person's a Medicare recipient, Medicaid rather recipient, we'll send it to our Medicaid fraud control section. If someone's being ripped off by a business or a service provider, it might go through our healthcare section under the Bureau of Consumer Protection. If it's identity theft or financial exploitation over $20,000, the Attorney General has jurisdiction over certain matters. It might go to our financial crime section or insurance fraud section. So, we're not just resources, we're also looking to, is there an opportunity for an investigation that would lead to a prosecution? How do we end this activity that we know is harmful to the older adult or care dependent person? We're reviewing all that information. And sometimes it's not within our authority or our jurisdiction. We have to forward it to another agency. We share information often with some of our partners when it's appropriate. Our Department of Aging, the area agencies on aging by county. We may be referring things to the state police, to our local agencies, local district attorney, our federal partners. Next slide. So who are we protecting? I keep saying care dependent person and older adult, right? Well, care dependent person is anyone 18 years of age or older who has a physical or cognitive impairment for which they receive care, services, or treatment to manage their everyday activities, life activities. So these are the people that we are focused on, as well as our older adults in Pennsylvania. That's 60 and older, which doesn't seem like an older adult, especially to this guy who just turned 60 6 months ago. So, but that's what the law is telling us. 60 and older, you're an older adult, and we are available to assist and provide protection when appropriate and provide resources at all times for you, family members, friends, and neighbors. Next slide. We do investigate and prosecute when, again, the authority for us to act is available to us. The Office of Attorney General is a statewide law enforcement agency. Our specialty is investigations. The OAG, we have a neglect team that specializes in cases of neglect, abuse, and endangerment through our Medicaid fraud control section. The OAG has a healthcare oversight addition to us. So we're not just a law enforcement agency. We have the authority as a healthcare oversight agency, which means sometimes HIPAA is not a hurdle for us to get over. We can work through that. We have access to medical records and other information that's needed for these types of investigations to be successful. We also have access to our statewide investigative grand jury, and we employ a full-time registered nurse to help navigate the medical records and the activities that are maybe alleged to have occurred. And we work jointly with local police, district attorneys, and all the agencies I named earlier. So, we are big on teamwork and how do we network these cases to get the best results for the public. If you have a referral, if you believe somebody might have a case of neglect, endangerment, abuse, financial exploitation, you want to contact us, please do. If it's a patient that's under care or living in a professional environment, you want to contact the Medicaid fraud control section. Email is mfcsintake@attorneygeneral.gov. Telephone 717-712-1220 or 717-783-1481. And of course, visit the AG website. We're www.attorneygeneral.gov/Medicaid. And just take note, there is no PA in our website. Often that's a mistake. People try to find us and they have difficulty. Evidently, from what I was told when I started back in 2007, we were the first Attorney General's office in the country to have a website, and no one thought to put Pennsylvania in there. So we're simply attorneygeneral.gov. Keith, next slide, please. You can make a report to Pennsylvania's Adult Protective Services through the Pennsylvania Department of Aging. Again, this is not our number. This will go directly to Adult Protective Services. And when you dial this 800 number from whatever county you are in, you will be connected to the local area agency on aging that represents that particular county. That's 1-800-490-8505. That's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week phone number. 1-800-490-8505 to report any form of abuse. And the website is www.aging.pa.gov. This is what our website looks like at attorneygeneral.gov. If you go onto the Get Help tab and click over to seniors, you'll be able to see our contact information for the Senior Protection Unit, which is my unit. And we have our toll-free helpline, which is during business hours, Monday through Friday, except holidays. And we're more than happy to speak to you and how we can assist you. We have resources available right there on the website, our brochures, publications, booklets, how to submit a senior complaint form, how to submit, how you can receive safety tips in our brochures. And again, there's programs and educational material available, everything at your fingertips. If you notice at the top right in the blue field, there's a white rectangle, submit a complaint. Simply click that, go down the right panel, and you would select a senior protection complaint. Or if it's more specific, if you know it's Medicaid fraud, click Medicaid fraud. If it's a consumer issue, click consumer. If someone's been scammed by an unknown perpetrator, not a family member, not a caretaker, then you want to use that scam complaint form. Keith? Let's talk a little bit more about our education and outreach efforts. Next. So the Office of Public Engagement, which my section falls under, offers varieties of brochures, resources, and programming for everyone. You don't have to be an older adult. Everyone has an older adult in their life, a parent, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, neighbor, friend, someone from your place of worship that you want to assist. We're always looking to share information, provide it to the public, and we have plenty of information out there. We have subject matters that include caregiver abuse and neglect, which is part of today. This is only a portion of that whole presentation. The whole presentation is about an hour and just top 10 scams against seniors. I did that this morning for a group out in Lehigh Valley. Identity theft, prevent and resolve senior bullying. Yep, that's what you heard. Adult bullying. So sometimes that's an issue of concern that we need to be looked at. And we do have an educational program with some tips about that. Home improvement fraud. They often target our older adults. They're looking for that perfect home with the perfect fence and garden and flowers out front. Maybe they got a veteran's flag or bumper sticker on. They see the older adult come and go. They've targeted that person. Online pharmacies, what you need to know to protect yourself. And funeral fraud, bereavement scams, and many more. So this is just a few highlights of some of those program topics that we offer. Check out the website for more information on Office of Public Engagement. My contact information, folks, toll free again, Senior Protection Unit, 1-866-623-2137. Again, that's not the 24-hour hotline. That's our office during business hours. You can feel free to email my unit at seniors@attorneygeneral.gov. And I'm Dave Shallcross on behalf of Attorney General Michelle Henry. I thank the AOPC and PCCD for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you for joining us. Keith?
Okay, thank you, Dave. And I share the same thought. Thank you for joining us here with the OEJC and AOPC to do this presentation. This concludes our presentation, so we're happy to open it up for any Q&A. Natalie or Tanya, I'm not sure if you're handling that.
I don't see anything. I did see Natalie put something in the chat when we first started. I don't know if she wants to expand on her question.
Well, I think David answered it.
Oh, okay.
One of the things, and I think some of these issues primarily are the groups that we work with are domestic violence, sexual assault agencies, and obviously they see these crimes. They see these crimes as maybe within a relationship that has been around for a number of years, or they see it, particularly I've heard about, the institutional sexual assault. What are the kinds of issues that you see when you have someone, who's in a nursing home or a personal care home who's being victimized? And I know that those can be kind of tricky because the homes try to take care of those things internally. And I don't believe that Pennsylvania has a national elder abuse registry either. And I thought that there was some type of legislation introduced a few years ago that was supposed to establish something like that, similar to what we have for child abuse. So I don't know if there's anyone, in the audience who maybe, is grappling with some of these issues. But if there's anything that David or Keith you want to talk about. Another thing that I noticed in looking at some of your literature is that there is a bench book for judges on working with these cases. And does that get into any of the best practices maybe for elders who all of a sudden find themselves having to come to court? Are there best practices for, how you assist someone maybe who is elder and maybe they need some special accommodations to participate in court? How do you access those types of things?
Absolutely. Thank you, Natalie. The bench book does go over a lot of what you mentioned there, and through other programs with the courts to get any kind of assisted, like listening device, communication device, sign language interpreter, anything that would help for someone that's an older Pennsylvania that needs to go to court, that needs those assistive devices. That's, if it's not in the bench book, there is programs within the courts to do that. The bench book really does focus though on best practices, how to make sure the guardianship proceedings can be held for anyone of any age appropriately, guidelines for the judges, when alternatives should be considered, etc. So it's very inclusive and it's available for the public as well. You can go right on our website. I can give you the full website address, but it's much easier. Just Google Office of Elder Justice in the Courts. It's much easier than giving the website out. So find it that way, and right on that page, you can get into the guardian bench book as well, the guardianship bench book, as well as the elder abuse bench book.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that you provided a really comprehensive presentation. It was a lot to take in, and I'm sure that the folks in our audience will take a look at your website sometime, or take this back to their STOP collaborative teams that deal with the multi-system response that the county has to victims, including older victims.
Thank you, Natalie. I just put our email address in the chat as well if anybody is interested in contacting our office. So we're happy to help any way we can, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Take care.
Okay. One thing that I would like to bring up to our STOP grantees is that as my staff and I have been out conducting monitoring visits, we're also reviewing the competitive applications that some of you have submitted in response to the open solicitation for the next round of STOP funding. We just wanted to acknowledge that we know that a lot of you are experiencing a lot of anxiety about the protocol tools and what is going to be expected of each team in revising your protocols. I think as my staff and I have been out all across the state in a number of counties, we do want to acknowledge that we hear what you are telling us in terms of turnover, particularly with respect to prosecutors' offices. Some prosecutors' offices have been operating severely understaffed for a year or two. There were many reasons for this. And also the turnover in law enforcement as well as victim services. What we are wanting to see, and I think this is demonstrated as our staff come out and attend your STOP team meetings, as we're taking a look at all of the attachments that you put in with your competitive applications, just so you know, we don't ask you to do that just for the heck of it. We do. We're going through, we're reading the minutes of your team meetings. We're taking a look at the current protocols that you've sent in and all the other additional material. I think that, we're looking to see that you're at least putting forth a good faith effort to do this. And I know you're saying, Natalie, geez, what does a good faith effort mean? Well, we can tell when we attend your STOP meeting, this is something that's on the agenda. Counties are choosing to go about this work in different ways, and that's fine because we don't want to dictate how you should handle this massive task. But we're seeing, as we see STOP teams, they're at least acknowledging that this tool is out there, that there are expectations that people take their current protocols that they have and, take a look at what the content of those protocols in sort of like a side-by-side thing with our STOP protocol development tool. I think that we have tried to do a good job of identifying, what the basic requirements are or the essential information that needs to be in those protocols. And you don't, we've said this many times, but we're still hearing from some folks that they think that you need to, throw the baby out with the bathwater, to use an old cliche, that you got to write everything. You got to start from scratch and create this whole big thing. No, start with what you have. Many of you have had STOP for a number of years. You've got a lot of this covered. We're just asking you to fill in the holes or the missing pieces that you see as you work through the protocols. And getting back to looking at the competitive applications and the minutes that are attached in the protocols. I mean, I think we can tell those of the counties that have had this on their radar for the last several months, and that are trying in various ways with the capacities they have to complete this task. So, I would just like to make sure that, some of these things are said. I hope it gives you, it helps to tamp some of the anxiety down. And with these check-ins that we've had, we've tried to select different items from the protocols that we thought we could bring you some extra information or that would provide some context. What we're also hearing from folks as we go out and talk to them is that you appreciate these call-ins. I mean, these check-ins. You've appreciated the presenters and the materials that we've given you, but you also would like us to focus a little bit more on that protocol development tool and some of the questions you're having. So we anticipate in the future making a little bit of a change to the way these check-ins are run. We're not sure how that will look, but what we do plan to do is focus a little bit more on what you're struggling with the protocols. And I also realize that on a public thing like this, it's just it's just human nature and the nature of group dynamics that people don't really want to ask questions for a variety of reasons. So what I really encourage people to do is to use the STOP resource account, which I will put in the chat before we leave. Use that resource account, put your questions in there, and we will get those and we will use those as a springboard for discussion at our check-ins. And obviously, we're not going to use anyone's name, anyone's agency or county or any identifying information. But chances are, if you're struggling with something, other people are struggling with it too. And we don't know until we hear from you. So I think in the spirit of that, my talking about what we're expecting for the protocols and providing a little bit of insight and context there, that is us taking the first step because we heard that from a couple of places that we monitored. We also received a question about what we're expecting in terms of team confidentiality. And I think that what confidentiality for the STOP team means is that, a lot of you have some kind of little participation agreement or something that you have members sign when they officially join. And I think what we're looking for and what OVW is looking for, since everybody around the table has different parameters of confidentiality, is simply that the group, understands everybody's level of confidentiality by profession. And that also, when you are talking about an issue or a particular case, I don't know how often your team does that. I know some teams will have general scenarios that they'll use so they can talk through, how they can do things better. That, you won't use any of the personally identifiable information. The buzzword now is PII, or any little elements that somebody from the outside could use to put together that would help them identify who you're talking about. And, obviously you want to tell the members of the team or put something in that statement that the things that are talked about at the team meeting should stay with the team and it should not really be divulged just in general conversation or with other folks who aren't on the team. Now I'll tell you, thank you, Tanya. Tanya put that resource account there. So please help us to understand more about where the challenges are for you out there. And then we will do our best to take your questions or the things that you're just, that you're just coming back to and trying to figure out. We'll try to do our best to help you or give you some suggestions or strategies you might use for overcoming those things. We still do maintain contact with the original statewide folks who were on the original protocol work group who actually helped write these protocols. We can still take the questions back to them and they can mull over them. So we have a lot of resources at your disposal, and we really don't want anyone out there who is getting physically ill and not being able to sleep at night because of these protocols, because that was not our intention. Of course, we don't want you to swing the whole other way and say, forget it, I'm not doing anything. Don't do that, but just keep working at it, okay? And I don't know if there are any other members of our original statewide work group that want to add anything to this. Feel free to unmute yourself and show yourself and speak. But I don't think it was ever our intent from the start to impose an impossible burden on folks. Going once, going twice. Okay. Well, as I said, thank you for tuning in to this. I hope you got some new information out of it and some resources that you didn't have before. Pennsylvania has a large and growing population of elders, and we know you guys are serving them and seeing them. These are just 2 additional tools in your toolbox. So I think that we'll close now. We have recorded this, and then we will